And the controversy continues over the Vatican's recent prohibition of the blessing of same-sex unions, as does the increasing pressure on the Church to change her teaching on homosexuality. And it's Earth Day, and Pope Francis appeared before an international leaders summit on climate change. Joining me now to report on these stories and much more is the Rome correspondent for the National Catholic Register, author of The Next Pope, Edward Pentin. Ed, thanks for being here. I want to start with your report in the Register this week about the pressure that continues to be directed at the Pope to adjust church teaching on homosexuality, particularly this phrasing from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. It reads, "Tradition has always declared that homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered. They are contrary to the natural law. They close the sexual act to the gift of life. They do not proceed from a genuine affective and sexual complementarity. Under no circumstances can they be approved." Now, activists, including high-ranking bishops and cardinals, particularly from the German church, they have a problem with that phrase, intrinsically disordered. Pope Francis has already made a change in the catechism regarding the death penalty. What are you hearing about this in Rome, and how much momentum is behind this push?
Well, this has been going on for some time, Raymond, where they've been certain people in the church have been trying to change this wording in the catechism for different reasons. One of them is because they want to see the difference in church teaching. They want the same-sex relations to be normalized in the church. Others say there's a need to change it because there just needs to be less hurtful, as they say. And others who say, well, you can still have the same wording, but also, change the wording, but keep the teaching, and in fact make the teaching perhaps stronger through it. So there's different schools of thought, but I think the main movement here is coming from the German bishops particularly, but others too, who really want to normalize sexual relations within the church, normalize that sinful practice, and there's a certain momentum now going forward with this, and that seems to be quite prevalent.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, it's not just the Germans. I mean, you've got cardinals, Christoph Schönborn of Austria. He's the man who oversaw the editing of the catechism, we should say, and Joseph Tobin here in the United States. And they're openly calling for a softening of this teaching. Are others making their voices heard in opposition, or is this basically the group we're talking about?
Yes, I mean, you hear it from different groups lower down the ranks, of course, but you have heard it for some time, and certainly in private, it's said a lot. I think this is what I've been hearing, but as you say, it goes from top to bottom, and there is a strengthening movement, I think, and being led by the German bishops. I spoke to Gabriella Kubi, who's a specialist in gender ideology and what she calls the sexual revolution, in the global sexual revolution in the church. And she said the German bishops are leading the way in making the church compatible with what she calls secular paganism. And this is just another example of that, according to her.
Well, here's the real question. Is the church listening? Is Pope Francis listening? I mean, there were some reports about activists calling him about the way the CDF stated this prohibition on blessing gay unions, and this individual indicated that Pope Francis was going to fix it. What does that mean?
Well, it's open to question. I mean, often Pope Francis will open these things to debate, and everyone wonders, well, why is that? Why is he doing that? But it seems to be because he wants, or at least allowing, the progressive side to move forward with this. And even though he will put out these statements from the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, for example, saying no to same-sex unions, at the same time, not much else is done really to put a stop, if you like, to those forces within the church which are trying to push the teaching away from the magisterium. And I think that is the constant sort of way the Pope has approached this issue, as with many others.
Also this week, the U.S. State Department held a leaders summit on climate. Pope Francis was originally scheduled to make an address at one time, then his name disappeared from the lineup, and then he popped up at the last moment, and he did issue a videotaped statement in Spanish, saying in part, "I greet you who are gathered in this initiative that seems to me a happy one, an initiative that sets us all on the path. All of humanity, through its leaders, our concern is to see that the environment is cleaner, healthier, and conserved. and to take care of nature so that it takes care of us. Ed, why was this statement delivered, first of all, later in the day? And was he always going to be a part of this summit?
Well, no, we only found out about that he was going to be a part of the summit later in this week. And in fact, only yesterday I was alerted to it. We don't know quite why, but it is Earth Day today. So it fell in very much with another message which he gave to commemorate that, to mark that day. So it all rather fits in with that. But again, you see, the Pope is very happy to talk about these issues. But the criticism here is that he will weigh in on these very secular concerns, but less so on others, which are perhaps politically incorrect or politically sensitive, particularly for the Vatican, such as China, for example, and things like this, where he's less keen to weigh in, but he will do so on those issues which get a good reception in the media and in politics.
No, I was surprised he didn't mention God or Jesus or the, care of nature, God commanding us to care for nature as part of that address. It was just kind of, a general, I'm glad you all are meeting, good on you. I mean, that was basically the message. Ed, you also wrote a piece this week on the Vatican's continuing silence on the human rights abuses in China, as you mentioned a moment ago, and the relationship between the Vatican and one of its longtime advisors, population control advocate, Professor Jeffrey Sachs of Columbia University. Now, Sachs has been an apologist for communist China in the past. He had this to say recently on the BBC when asked about China's human rights abuses.
What about America's human rights abuses? The Iraq War, together with the UK, completely illegal and under false pretenses, not to mention the continued massive racism, white supremacism, and abuse of incarceration of hundreds of thousands of people in the U.S., Black, African-American, people of color.
And in response to Sachs, human rights activist, Chinese human rights activist Tang Bao said this.
Every time when the United States criticizes the human rights abuse in China, the Chinese government said, look at your country and look at your racism. That look at in history you killed Indians, Native Americans. So that's a political whataboutism. That's really misleading. American. It's not detaining more than 1 million Uyghurs, not killing a whole people.
Ed, this is why the race narrative that we're hearing in the United States from some is so poisonous. It weakens America's ability to do good in the world and advocate for freedom abroad. How much influence, though, do you really think Jeffrey Sachs has at the Vatican? I mean, is it enough to stifle their reaction to China's human rights crimes?
Well, it's not clear. I mean, certainly he comes here a lot. Apparently he comes twice a month to the Vatican, and he's been to many conferences, and he's been here a long time, for over 10 years he's been coming here. And he certainly is listened to by the Vatican, certainly by certain parts of it, like the Pontifical Academy for Sciences, and other dicasteries, the dicastery for human development, for example. So he is listened to, and I think it's very interesting. The reason why I wrote that was because I thought it was interesting that the very similar approaches they have to China, particularly, and the reluctance to be in any way really critical of China's human rights abuses, and instead focus on the United States, for example, which, as Tang Bao says in the interview in that program, that they're not really equivalent. They're very different. Of course, the genocide against the Uyghurs, which the UK Parliament declared today, it is a genocide. That is not heard about. They don't really talk about that sort of thing, and including the Vatican is very silent on that because, as many believe, they don't want to interfere or jeopardize the agreements that they've made with Beijing. So there are similarities, and I think certainly Jeffrey Sachs is championed by, or rather praised or promoted by the media in China, the state-run media, and certainly seems to be on their side in many ways. So I think it's an interesting comparison, and I think some might think quite a disturbing one.
I'll say. We'll leave it there. Ed Pentin, thank you so much. And picking up on our conversation with Ed, what are the pastoral challenges that arise when dissent is carried out openly by high-ranking bishops and cardinals? And are radical changes to Catholic sexual morality even possible? To address this and much more, I'm joined by parish priest, a familiar face, and president of the Acton Institute, our friend Father Robert Sirico. Father, thank you for being with us. I just spoke with Ed Pentin about this push at the highest levels to change or at least soften the traditional teaching on homosexuality. I want to get your thoughts as a pastor on the challenges this creates for you and other parish priests when you have bishops and cardinals publicly on record saying they're embarrassed by recent church teachings, or Cardinal Joseph Tobin saying that some of the language used is very unfortunate. What are your thoughts on this vocal dissent we're hearing?
Well, it stands to set up a kind of dynamic where people will say, when you're trying to present the authentic teaching of the church, the 2,000-year teaching of the church, and longer than that in Western civilization, that they say, well, but the Cardinal so-and-so says this, and Cardinal so-and-so says that.
Right.
You know, especially in the area of homosexuality, it takes a lot for a person to surrender to this arduous cross and to have it weakened in the name of making it easier, when they're really denying people the opportunity to surrender everything to Christ. It's cheap grace, really.
Are we near a schism, do you think, as we saw in the Anglican Communion over this issue?
I think we are near another schism, given what's going on in Germany and the Holy See's response to that. I think this could become very serious, because the church isn't obviously not going to change its teaching. We can certainly express our ideas in different ways, and certainly change our attitudes of acceptance and love and support of people. But we can't change the teaching, because we didn't invent the teaching. We received the teaching. We're not in the business of creating a church. We're in the business of preserving a church.
Yeah, it's an important point that few make, particularly today. I want to get your reaction to something that was reported by Evita Duffy at the Federalist this week. Cardinal Blaise Cupich issued an order last weekend forbidding University of Chicago students from attending Mass on campus or anywhere else due to the COVID outbreak. Associate Director of Campus Ministry Matthew Moran wrote to students in an email telling them not to attend Masses at the school or any other parish because it would, quote, be risky and scandalous for those aware of the university restrictions. Now, Father, college students have a 99% COVID survivability rate.
Sure.
Aren't these restrictions a little harsh? And isn't the scandal advising students to skip Mass?
It is, and to just go beyond, just the chaplaincy, the nearby parish they can't even attend Mass at, I think it is highly imprudent. Now, a bishop has the right to interdict, in effect, a parish. This is a little different. This is telling students who could find a place to go to Mass, as I understand it, that they can't go to Mass in the vicinity. And I think it is imprudent and places the priests in a very difficult position, because I have no doubt that those priests want to serve their people.
Yeah, no, it does put them in a trick bag. I mean, if they asked me what to do, I would tell them, but I better not. Before I let you go, I want to get your reaction to the
on this station.
Yeah. Before I let you go, I want to get your reaction to the sentencing last week of Catholic businessman, human rights activist Jimmy Lai to 14 months in prison for his role in pro-democracy demonstrations in Hong Kong. I know you're a close friend and a confidant of Jimmy. What do you make of this decision by the Chinese authorities? And have you heard from Mr. Lai since he was sentenced?
Yes, I have, not directly, but indirectly. He's asked me to write. I'm going to be beginning a correspondence, being supportive, and he's asked for some books. I'm suggesting Cardinal Van Tuan's prison journal and Cardinal Pell's prison journal, as well as the letters of St. Thomas More to his family. This was expected. This is the first, and there are more severe cases in the offing. My real fear is that they will transfer him to a prison in China. I think you have a Navalny situation here. I think really in many respects, Jimmy Lai is like a Solzhenitsyn. He's like a Mandela. This is a man who didn't have to be in the situation he's in. He's a billionaire. He has homes in various places. He has a British passport. He could have left. He could have taken his money out of Hong Kong. He stayed for the sake of the witness to the freedom of enterprise, to the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and he's paying the price now for it. It's an arduous cross that he now must bear.
Mm-hmm. Well, we ask our audience to pray for him and for all those who are being imprisoned.
Pray for his family, especially pray for his family and his dear wife, Teresa.
Mm-hmm. And are you surprised by how little in the way of support we're seeing for religious dissidents in China coming from this administration in the United States? Before I let you go, Father.
Well, never mind coming from this administration. What about coming from the Vatican? I think that in both cases, this is highly lamentable. I hope this administration will reconsider. You know, what's remarkable about Jimmy's case is that there is a lot of support among liberals. The New York Times has written repeatedly about the injustice of this. Organizations like PEN, which is an international organization of free speech advocates, and other groups, and even Nancy Pelosi has spoken out on his behalf. So I think more has to be done, and we have to give higher profile to these people.
I agree. Father Robert Sirico, we will leave it there. You can follow Father's work at the Acton Institute. They're at acton.org. Thank you, Father.
God bless.